This is not about male empowerment. This is not about female empowerment.
It
It's this relational empowerment. It's about together we can be strong. It's not.
Can or do mental health issues invariably stem from childhood trauma?
I'm a huge fan of EMDR.
Because EMDR, you are opening Pandora's box often.
Right, yeah.
You're revisiting the pain. You've had addiction.
That is my journey.
You're a former
alcoholic. Yeah. Gateway addiction was alcohol dependence.
Is it possible to overcome hurt and pain from our past? Well, we're here again for another episode of So What's Your Story? And men often struggle to express themselves. More men take their own lives under the age of 45 than has ever been recorded in history. Today's guest, he is a Dubai licensed clinical psychologist, a coach, founder of the Better Man Initiative. Remove shame, discover self-purpose, and love themselves. His own journey isn't one of plain sailing. As he will share with us today, he has overcome the odds and had his own struggles, including addiction. So join me as I ask Dr. David Lee. So, what's your story? Welcome, David.
Thank you, Ian. It's an absolute privilege to be here with you this evening. And a real honor to be your guest.
Yeah, and you're based here in Dubai, but listeners will go, well, he's English, isn't he? And you are.
I am indeed English. I'm from Manchester.
You're
Manchester born and bred. 10
Yeah.
years, almost 10 years, coming up to, I think now, out here in Dubai. So yeah, almost here for a decade, regularly backwards and forwards, you know.
Well, thanks for joining us. And
My pleasure.
I think we'll just jump straight in because, I said in the intro there, there is a almost like pandemic of challenges in mental health. And we're going to steer this episode more towards men than other, sort of sides of that, because that's where you've had your specialist area in the main. I said you're the founder of the Better Man Initiative. We'll talk about that towards the end. But you're a clinical psychologist. Would you agree that there has been a notable upturn in the diagnosis and treatment of mental health conditions?
Yeah, I think it's really interesting. I mean, it's one thing to look at the data and the statistics and what the evidence is showing us. Another thing to work clinically and to see what's going in. So one of the things that I like to think is happening is that men are coming forward more on the whole to be able to speak, about their problems. Let's say if they're feeling depressed or they're struggling with anxiety or, they're well aware that there is a problem. Let's say it's an addiction or something that they need to face at some point, What I think is perhaps not so encouraging is those figures that you talk about in terms of, men taking their own lives and
it's
suicide
tragic.
rates. Yeah. I mean, I think I was talking to a peer about some statistics only last week, and I think the rates are still very, very high. I think overall there's been a bit of a plateau in suicide rates, but I think the reality is we can safely say things haven't gone down, and in certain age brackets they're on the increase.
I know.
So the severe end, where men get to the point where they feel they need to take their own lives, and I believe it happens before that men start to check out, the picture isn't looking so good. But I think the reality is that a lot more men are now coming for therapy and feeling able to do so.
Yeah. I think for a long time, and let's just actually take a pause there, because, women taking their own lives is on the increase. The interesting thing that I've researched on that statistic is that a lot of women, it isn't recorded. And let me be specific, UK, because men are a bit more extreme in that, you know, horrible moment.
Yeah.
They kind of make it happen. And a lot of women want to end things, and it isn't quite so strong an attempt. So they may come around and it's never recorded. So therefore it's not to lessen that there are a lot of women taking their own lives. It's just that because when we're looking at statistics, it has to be recorded, you know, evidentially. And I'm not making light of anything that a woman may do, because either way, it's a tragic decision. It's you know, it's awful.
Yeah.
Particularly for those that are left behind.
Yeah.
But I think, to your point, men are becoming better at expressing themselves, whereas it used to be not that long ago a bit of a taboo area. Oh, David, I'm not feeling great. Oh, come on, pull yourself together. You know, man up. Nothing wrong with you. Crack on. You know, I've had these things said to me. I've had my challenges in a long time ago. Do you think that that's, well, you said it there, men are getting better, but it's knowing where that safe place is, isn't it?
Yeah. I think men are, on the whole, becoming more willing to come forward, I think, with support. I think as, you know, psychology, psychotherapy, the availability of therapy, let's say, has become more widely accepted, more televised, that men are seeing that, oh yeah, I can go and maybe talk about my problems. Or they're feeling a bit of a nudge to go and do so by family, you know, by their spouse or whatever. I think there still is a culture of men who, you know, still feel that they have to live up to the idea of man up, you know.
The masculine,
yeah. It's I think Lewis Howes once wrote about it in his book, the mask of masculinity, you know. That becomes the mask, the front. And so, I mean, this is like, you know, you could say the archetype of man, the warrior or the gladiator or whatever. But I also think what we've had in over the years is kind of a pushback by some men towards feminism. I think what's happened in some way, men feel like they can't quite get it right by women, so men have sort of, you know, checked out and given up in a sense. And I think where we're at now, and this is honestly, you know, what I believe is the case, and what I like to help men with, is the idea that men can be strong, men can be assertive, men can be firm, they can be, you know, protectors and providers, if you like. That's not to undermine women at all. But men can also be compassionate, self-compassionate, you know, kind to self. They can stand for good values. Getting that balance is not an easy one, right? And straddling the continuum in men is really, really difficult. At one end, I get men coming in saying, I just, you know, give my head a wobble and just get back to work. And then at the other end, some men are now highly sensitive. You know, you don't have to say too much to offend them, and they're, you know, very brittle, I think. So actually helping men to be both compassionate, emotionally attuned individuals, you know, good men of society, good husbands, if you like, good partners, good fathers, if that is the case, whatever, and good family members, but still to be able to deal with and take on responsibility and not feel they just have to wear the mask, if you like, or the armor all of the time, which prevents them from speaking out.
I'm so glad you've gone to that point, because it's almost as if you read my notes. I think there is men are essentially masculine.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I believe that.
And women are essentially feminine. Now, some people are going to go, oh, hang on a minute, Ian. Because, of course, there's neurodiversity where we've got, another level. But let's just take man, woman. There is a blurred line. For example, a successful woman is dominant. She has a streak of masculinity, correct?
Yeah.
A strong leader, man, successful, has the same. But does a woman want to be a strong masculine leader woman? Does she want also the masculinity from the man? So the man maybe gets confused.
Yeah.
What am I here?
Yeah.
Do I have to be strong because I have a strong woman beside me? Do I have to be compassionate because she has that side to her? And it's like this blurred line. And we hear the term modern man. But does that genetically or in our DNA become a little bit confusing for some people?
I think it does. And I think genuinely some men are very confused about what their position is and where they stand. I like this concept of, I heard it from, somebody I look up to, therapist, writer, inspired me a great deal in recent years, Terry Real. And he talks about the interplay of male-female dynamics, particularly in he's a couples therapy expert,
right, okay.
basically. So, but what he talks about is the snag, the SNAG, the sensitive new age guy. Who is that brittle kind of character who maybe is undermined by the women in his life, but in any way he's adopted this persona of maybe I can't get it right, or I'm offended. The other extreme, I think, is the stereotypical alpha male warrior gladiator, if you like, and those men don't know where they stand. But where, and I think there's somewhere. I'm not even sure it's in the middle of those two. I think it's more complex than that. I think we do. To your point, I agree with the idea of masculinity. It doesn't mean it's always just the man that's exhibiting these qualities, by the way, and that's what we see now.
Exactly.
But what I'm more interested in is how we help men to be relational, first and foremost. So relationality among the genders, if you like, between men and women. This is not about male empowerment. This is not about female empowerment. It's about, Gabor Mate says this, relational empowerment. It's about together we can be strong. It's not one over the other.
Right, because you're the subject matter expert today. Am I right in saying that all men have a feminine side or an element of femininity?
Now, I mean, I don't like to think about it like that necessarily, if I'm honest with you.
Right.
I mean, I think all men have a part of them that can be attuned, sensitive, compassionate, caring, loving, and kind, all right? That said, I do draw a lot, and more increasingly in recent years, on the work of Carl Jung, who's one of the the godfathers of psychotherapy.
Yeah.
And he talks about the male the male part of the female psyche and the female part of the male psyche. The animus in the female case, so with the male part of the psyche, and the anima, the feminine part of the male psyche, if you like. And I believe that those are really, really useful concepts, especially when you're helping a man to explore parts of himself that he doesn't really want to have integrated. If you've got let's say a female part of you, or let's say, I'm going to use an example here. Let's say you had quite a difficult relationship with your mom, and you're a man, and you get a little bit older, you felt you were abandoned by your mom, and she didn't really prioritize your needs. There is a high likelihood that there is a part of your psyche that is exiled, it's pushed away. You don't really want to fully connect with that, and it's likely to be a wound that's connected to the female part of you, the female part of the psyche, or the anima, as Carl Jung referred to. So in that sense, I believe that all men have a female part of them that they're not necessarily always connected to. But if we're talking purely about men in their relationships, their relationality. Well, I'm a father as well. I have a son who's pretty much a young adult these days. He's almost 18. And I believe the way I relate to him as a father is hopefully both a bit of, strength and embodiment of assertiveness and positivity and goal setting and all that kind of stuff, but at the same time sensitivity and compassion, I would hope. But I don't think it's for me to attune to my son, my teenage son. I don't think that needs to be that I become feminine, for example. I think I can be kind, attuned, compassionate, hopefully.
It's so interesting because you can see, and there's great examples throughout history, and even as we look at some famous people who are they're big, you see them with a child and they're so gentle and kind.
That's
and
right.
loving, get emotional, show a tear. It's there, right?
Yeah.
And it's so interesting that you sort of brushed on an area which I want to bring up to the surface, if I may, which is can or do mental health issues invariably stem from childhood trauma? And I know this is it's an interesting question because also later life occurrences can trigger something, can't it?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That isn't connected to the childhood trauma.
Yeah.
So I guess what I'm trying to ask here is it more common from a earlier life experience or not?
Yeah. There are two ways you could look at this. One is that we live in times where it's been it's been the vogue to pin everything on childhood trauma, right?
Yeah,
and
that's what I'm coming to.
Everything is a result of childhood. It's back to your childhood. It's back. I mean, it's not a new thing, right? People accused Sigmund Freud of that, but there has been like a plethora of books, in the last decade or so around this kind of stuff. So first of all, I mean, I guess I specialize in the treatment of trauma.
You do,
right?
You do,
as well as addiction as well. That doesn't mean I attribute everything to childhood trauma. I believe our formative years shape our experience. I believe our attachments and our relationships are particularly important. Our formative years, in a sense, are the fertile ground, from which the roots sprout, if you like. And you could say, I like what one psychologist says. He says, like, our family experience, our formative year, that's the marinade that we're cooked in. And there doesn't need to be any big T trauma, if you like, for us to be influenced and affected. And my sense is that the way our relationships play out later often comes back to those attachment patterns. Does that mean that we need to have trauma in order to then have problems in our later relation? No, not necessarily. You might have, grow up with a certain temperament. You meet a person who triggers you, and then all hell breaks loose, or as is more commonly the case, you become, there's a combination of like, dependence or codependence, if you like, and really needing each other, and I hate you, don't leave me kind of thing, it's that kind of dynamic. Like that's common. So I don't believe it's all down to huge big T trauma, if you like, in childhood. Sometimes the drip of our day-to-day interactions within the family can come to influence later relationships. And let's face it, I mean, it depends. Are we talking about relationships in couples here, living together, married couples?
I know, right?
But
it's huge,
relationality, isn't it? It's how we relate to our friends, our colleagues, our brothers, our sisters, etc. We live in a relational world, and how we are in those relationships is what's, I believe, that's just at the essence of mental health. That's what we're talking about, really.
It is really, it just is, and it's so fascinating.
Absolutely.
When we talk about that word trigger, again, we see it all the time now, hitting socials and everything else, where your trigger point was, and this is just,
it's another buzzword, and it has been for some time.
It just is, and but it is kind of, I get it.
Yeah.
And what you specialize in is helping your clients when they find one of the areas you specialize in, should I say, is when they have that trauma moment, that trigger.
Yeah.
It's to not just understand it, accept it, and also learn how to move beyond it.
That's right. Yeah.
But one of the things I heard you on another podcast, incidentally, was that you spoke about the treatment of that trauma. And we spoke off air, didn't we?
Yeah.
I said, it's not a quick fix. It's not like,
No.
I've done that then. That's it now.
Yeah.
That's gone.
Yeah.
Thank you very
one and
much.
done deal.
Yeah. What a done deal that is. We're out of here. We're on the home straight.
Exactly.
Because visiting those points can be painful, can't it?
Of course. Yeah. And that is the work, really. This is what I say to clients quite often. But, as a fellow traveler in the journey of recovery, hopefully from trauma and also, addiction and things, I say that this is the work, it's the path that we walk on. It's not a case of this is a quick fix and I have this, wonderful panacea for you that's gonna just erase the pain. Often it's going into the pain, entering the wound, if you like, the trauma wound, to heal, to have some of those experiences reprocessed, if you like, to then feel different.
Are you alluding to a process like EMDR?
Yeah, I'm a huge fan of EMDR. I use it with so many of my clients.
I know you do.
And I use it, I think, in an integrative way. I'm not just about EMDR is the only, approach out there, but I believe it's got a very strong evidence base. We use it with clients with so many different types of problems. And it's so versatile. It works in such a number of ways. There's a standard protocol. There are variations of it.
Yeah.
But it's a wonderful tool and therapeutic model, if you like, that does encapsulate what I'm talking about the journey through trauma into a new life, a new design for living, if you like. Yeah.
I interviewed Annalie Howling, and she is a practitioner of EMDR, as you know, and author and everything else. And, she speaks about this. And one thing that I'd like to include in this conversation is the importance, David, of the person you're working with. Yeah. Because EMDR, you are opening Pandora's box often.
Right, yeah.
You're revisiting the pain.
Yeah.
And if it isn't done correctly and by a very highly proficient psychotherapist or therapist, it can cause problems, right?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, it's probably one of my greatest bugbears in terms of the work that I do, the amount of charlatans that are out there.
I know, right? It's scary.
Often, training that's just unaccredited. It's just, it's just being cobbled together, and people are saying that I've done this 3-hour training or something, I can now practice EMDR or other approaches as well, and my sense is this. I mean, to practice therapy like EMDR, which we don't actually get trained in. If you do a doctorate in clinical psychology, you don't get trained in EMDR. Wow. You train in other approaches like cognitive behavioral therapy. You might have some kind of psychodynamically oriented training and various other things. But EMDR is a real specialism. For example, in Europe, I think it's slightly different in the States. There's 2-part training, but in Europe, 3-part training. And it's pretty intensive. And then there's, going through the whole continuing professional development sort of process, being supervised and doing. I mean, I invest a lot of my time and money back into training in EMDR and other approaches which I can integrate with EMDR as well.
Yeah.
But that's knowing the framework. My problem, it's not that I've got a problem with the coaching industry per se, but I have got a problem with the people who just call themselves a coach and go and do, a few hours training and then say, I'm a coach who does EMDR or something. That's a problem. That's really, that's where we've got to look at ethics.
And I think from a client's perspective, when I trusted my therapist
Yeah.
And she shared with me, it was my decision.
Yeah.
You know, she shared with me the whole process. She gave me some case studies. She was very, very thorough, but didn't say, I think we should do it, Ian. It was my decision. Also making me aware of where we were going to go with this process. But it's very difficult, and thank you for saying what you've said, because I think it's very difficult for people who are going into therapy, who may have read about EMDR, may have listened to something like this. Oh, I'm going to go get some EMDR then.
Yeah.
And like you say, how do you decipher whether you're in a very safe pair of hands or not?
Absolutely.
So all I would say to anybody, and you can perhaps help us with this, is do your homework.
Yeah.
Don't just dive into EMDR, because a relationship with a therapist or psychotherapist is so important.
Yeah, I mean, first of all, you want somebody with credentials, but you also want somebody that you can relate to
and
that you trust, as well. Like, there are some people out there who says, oh, if you don't like the therapist, you can go elsewhere. I don't always think it's about like. I think sometimes, as long as there's enough of a bond there and enough of a connection to feeling safe. And I think sometimes I'm not the most softly of therapists. I can be quite straight talking, but I think sometimes after a few sessions, clients can come to trust me. They can have the trust that, he's got my best interests in mind, and he can ground me and sometimes take the reins.
Yeah.
But it's not always about, oh, I like this person, because we like to sit down and drink tea with somebody, right, and eat toast and feel comfortable.
That's a good way of putting it.
And you've got to actually go and do the work. And I say that to clients. It's not about lacking compassion, but it's about saying we're here to do some work together, right? We're not just here to talk about things that we're comfortable talking about. But I do think it's something about feeling that you're comfortable with the person, comfortable to do the work with the person. That person has your best intention in mind. And yes, they have the knowledge and the skills, but also the adaptability. 'Cause that's really important, is working with clients. We have to, good therapist, I would say, has to be able to adapt to different clients, different client presentations, to be flexible enough to work with different people in different ways. I like the idea of what a bit of a guru in the field of psychotherapy, the late Arnold Lazarus, once said. He talked about this concept of the therapist being an authentic chameleon. So we can change. We can adapt our style, we can adapt the way that we work with a particular client, but authentically. This is not about manipulation. Saying I might need to position myself a bit differently with this client to help them.
I really like that. I have a very good therapist.
Wow.
And when we understand each other.
Yeah.
But in the early stages, in the early sessions, she said, Ian, I get the impression you don't want me to do the science bit and overcomplicate it. And I said, just straight talk me.
Yeah, she was very attuned to what you needed.
And it's like, and she knows that I need a bit of a story to understand.
Yeah.
And the way she's a brilliant therapist. But
she's attuned to you, to
yes,
what you
but I'm
what
sure
you need.
When I'm in session, it's very different to when somebody else may be.
Somebody else could be completely different.
Who might want the science and
they might like a lot. Tell me more about that. Give me more background. Give me more of this. Yeah.
So interesting.
Absolutely.
So interesting. You touched on there about falling into bad habits. Mm-hmm. Let's not gild the lily. I'm going to say addictions. Yeah. And a lot of people, again, not just men, women, fall into addiction, whether it be alcohol, drugs, gambling, pornography. There's a whole list of what people can quite easily get addicted to.
Yeah.
And healing and quitting that, what do you think is the most important part of, let's pick one of that list so we're focused, alcohol.
Yeah.
Right? What do you think is the most important part for somebody who maybe doesn't even know?
Yeah. Honestly, I believe it's having what we sometimes talk about as a bottoming out experience, hitting rock bottom in some way.
Really? Like saying that's enough.
Yeah, I mean, just sometimes, you need to lose a lot, or you need to lose something significant to get to the point where you say, this has got to go. Or you need to have that moment of awakening where you are able to look at yourself and say, what the heck is going to happen if I carry on in the same old way?
So what you're saying is, which is great, because that's exactly what I agree with you. It's the person saying, I will stop and change. Because what I'm going to suggest here, David, is, you've had addiction. You're a former.
That is my journey.
You're a former
alcoholic.
Yeah,
and other addictions as well, but primarily, my
Yeah.
gateway addiction was alcohol dependence. Yeah,
and I'm
for sure.
imagining. Please correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah,
there was people around you whilst you were falling into the depths of the addiction, saying, David, do you think you're just maybe drinking too much, or David, your behaviour's a little bit, so basically trying to help you.
Yeah.
Basically almost taking the horse to the water, but you don't want to, and it's a poor example because it's about drink, but it's got to come from the individual, has it not?
100%, because people often, they give the message right, but they give a really diluted version of the message. Like you said there, you're drinking too much. You should put that bottle of wine away now. You've had it's like you've had too many. It's like this is the third bottle of wine or something.
Isn't it a bit early to be drinking?
Yeah,
all of these
like
things.
You're starting early tonight, aren't you? And people often give the message in like diluted form when they're actually really worried about you.
Yeah.
But sometimes the people who are telling you there is a serious problem, I mean, sometimes you're so defended against that because you just see that as a personal attack. And, maybe they have a similar problem as well. So you don't want to hear from that person. You're like, who are you to tell me? Hypocrite, right?
Yeah.
But, I mean, I can speak to, my own personal experience.
Please.
I had to have a rock bottom. And I share this where it's appropriate. I share this in the work that I do, because I believe in the idea of, well, first of all, being a fellow traveler. In the work that I do, we're all human beings at the end of the day. But I also believed in the concept of the wounded healer. That doesn't mean that we just stay wounded and we carry on working with people and never do so. My journey of recovery, and it's an ongoing process, I believe, was 12-step recovery from alcoholism and other addictions as well. But then also doing the therapy, the in-depth therapy around the trauma and the predisposing factors that fed into that. In many ways, the two went in tandem. My therapist that I worked with over many, many years was actually somebody who knew the 12 steps inside out and was able to bring them into therapy in a way that I find I now do quite organically with my clients anyway.
Wow.
I don't think I can not work in a 12-step way now. Whether a client's got addictions or not, I'm always coming back to that. And you might say, well, that's very spiritual, isn't it? Well, it's transpersonal. And I believe the transpersonal does come into therapy. I mean, this is back to Carl Jung again. He was transpersonal in his orientation to therapy. It goes beyond the intrapsychic in the human being. But my sense is this: what works for one doesn't necessarily work for another.
Absolutely.
There are multiple pathways to recover from an addiction. So far be it from me to say, oh, you need to go and get 12-step recovery. You need to walk into the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous or Narcotics Anonymous or Gamblers Anonymous or whatever. That may not be the approach for you.
Correct.
You may be more of the therapeutic route. You may go to rehab. You may have more of the holistic kind of health orientation that is enough to kickstart your
not one solution fixes all, right? Because
that's
we're all individuals. But
that's right.
Just coming back to that point, if I may, I'm going to harbour this a little bit.
Yeah.
Is that you said for you it was rock bottom.
Yeah.
For many, it's not quite the rock bottom,
No.
but it is that point of. It's that point of accountability, accepting, because a lot of addicts, a lot of, people who have extremely bad habits, they deny it.
Yeah.
They lie.
Yeah.
No, I didn't have that. No, I didn't. Honestly,
Yeah.
I didn't. No, I've not had that many.
Yeah.
You know, no, I didn't start at 4 o'clock. Was that the time, really?
Yeah.
No, I didn't. I can't have. So it's these lies, isn't it?
Yeah.
So what I'm harboring here is, for you, you said you hit rock bottom.
Yeah.
So there was nowhere else to go apart from stop or presumably die, maybe.
Yeah, well, the consequences were looking me right
They
in
were
the face.
boom, boom, boom,
and it was
right?
the consequences for me. It was the marriage that was broken down completely.
Right,
It was
okay.
the being, having lost all my money effectively, being kicked out, estranged relationship from my son, and
Wow.
realizing I had to start again. And then that professional stuff, my career stuff.
Yeah.
I mean, we do things in addiction that we're not proud of, and then looking back, we say, "Wow, was that me?" But we realize how far down the path we had gone. To repair the process. My sense is this: there needs to be some sort of awakening, or at least waking up to the fact that there have been real consequences, or that if you continue to engage in the addictive behavior or the drinking or drugging, whatever it is, that it's going to have real adverse consequences to you. I think without that realization, what are you justifying? Just the behavior, like you said. Oh no, I'm just having an afternoon tipple right now. It's just I deserve it, right? And when those consequences, those real negative consequences, start to stack up, and you have to look at them and say, "Hang on, what is happening here?"
Yeah.
When the mess started to appear in my life in various forms, in various ways and different situations, I realized there was a common denominator, and that's that I was always there. So there had to be something there. I was always, and I'd been drinking again. But it's not just like, for example, with alcoholism, it's not just about the alcohol intake that's causing the problem.
No.
It's the madness and the insanity that underlies that's the problem as well.
Yeah.
In 12-step terminology, we talk about the spiritual malady or the lack of emotional sobriety, and part of recovery is not only getting off the thing, whatever it is. So you get off the booze, if you like, with the alcohol, or you get off the drug and you get clean, or you get sober, as we say. But it's the process of becoming emotionally sober so you can start to live life in a new way.
And you're talking there about this journey of healing, something which you're, really sort of strong, always have been, really. And then obviously your own rock bottom experience, and then noticing within yourself the changes.
Yeah. And I had to look. It wasn't that I just became, all of a sudden flash of light. I became introspective and really, really good at looking at myself and taking inventory of myself and looking inwards. No, I needed a lot of help. I needed a lot of therapy to do that, and a lot of support, and a lot of guidance, and people nurturing me, and people in recovery, people with a lot of recovery experience, a lot of both men and women, helping me, and really, and supportive people around me to do the work, without which I wouldn't have done it.
Yeah, and that really leads me to my next question, which is the danger of relapse.
Yeah.
Because without that help, that support, that reflection within, and also the professionals around you and friends and loved ones, and there is always a danger of the relapse.
Yeah.
For anybody who has an addiction, there is the danger of the relapse.
Yeah.
But is it am I right in saying, David, that in this journey of rehabilitation, one has to understand that the support network is super important, and to learn to say, I think I'm struggling a little bit.
Yeah, to be able to reach out. I think that is a big part of it, is staying connected, and the support network. You can't do this in isolation. You can't do recovery. You can't get sober or clean in isolation, right? I don't believe that to be the case, and I believe we need that ongoing support to stay committed to recovery and wedded to it. I think there's something there about complacency as well, that if we get complacent, we rest on our laurels, we stop doing the work that keeps us sober, that keeps us committed to recovery. And that's where you notice when I work with people, or I see people, because being in recovery myself, obviously, it's not just that my clients that I'm talking about here. You hear people saying, I just thought I could have that one drink. You know, I thought I could have one more good time. I could have one more session, one more time on it, and then it was a downward spiral from there. Whereas I think when we don't get complacent and we really work at it and we stay connected and we prioritize this stuff, we know enough to outwit that kind of thinking.
Yeah.
It's like, no, of course I can't have that first drink again. I know where that's going to take me to. But that there's a commitment to that. It has to be priority. You know?
It's so interesting. And I'm imagining, please again help us, when you hit rock bottom, that wasn't just today I'm drinking too much, tomorrow here I am rock bottom. It was a journey, it was a timeline. Yeah. And you don't have to tell us the specifics. That's fine. That's your prerogative to keep that private to yourself, unless you want to share. But would there have been points in there that you are or were, or maybe still are, ashamed of?
Yeah. I mean,
some of your behavior may be towards yourself and others maybe.
Yeah. I mean, you know, I think that's part of the deal. I think that's part of recovery, and being able to look at this stuff that we're ashamed of course. If I could go back and revisit the time when my son was younger and be a better, more present, more attuned dad to him, of course I would. I didn't know then what I knew now, or I didn't have available to me then what I now have available to me. Yeah. So to be able to look at that, to see what was needed. You know, we all have this good intentions. We might say, "Oh, I didn't get the care or the love that I received, that I needed as a child, so I'm not going to repeat that pattern." You know, a lot of people say that. I hear it a lot, but to actually be committed to that and to show up differently with our kids is really different. So yeah, of course, there are those things that I would have done differently. I got a second bite of the cherry with regard to marriage. I'm married for the second time now. I have a wonderful marriage to my wife now. But I think I needed to make a lot of mistakes the first time around with my ex-wife, my son's mother. You know, wow. I mean, not something I'm proud of. It's that looking back is I didn't know in an embodied way then what I know now, what I know and feel now. But I believe those experiences sort of have informed me more in hindsight, more having gone through the process of recovery to then look back and go, I was really on some sort of pathway to repeating some of that stuff. And then I got the opportunity to do the pivot and to start to do the work that's led me in another direction. And that is the daily work that we're talking about here. So it's being very aware of yourself, taking inventory, checking in with others. Yeah, it's the work.
I think, you know, I had my own challenges with alcohol.
Yeah,
I told you about that.
Yeah,
you know,
you did.
There is shame.
Yeah,
I'm not proud of some of the things that happened to me and the way I treated others. I really am not.
Yeah.
But then when 9 years now for me that I haven't touched alcohol, I don't believe I was an alcoholic, and that's not denial. It's just I had a very unhealthy relationship with alcohol.
Yeah.
Slightly different, maybe. Who knows?
Mm-hmm.
But one thing that I did encounter and still believe this, which is forgiveness.
Yeah.
Some people have forgiven me. Right. And I have forgiven other people.
Yeah.
I mean, is that part of, you know, when we talk about men's wellness, that you are, you know, you're the founder of, you know, something great that we're going to talk about in a moment. But do you think that's all part of the mix?
Yeah. I believe that part of doing this work, I mean, whether we're talking about addiction or problems with alcohol and, you know, or not, I mean, my you know, movement initiative, which is a recent thing to surrounding helping men to do this inner work, if you like. It's not exclusively about addiction, but do I think that forgiveness is a major part of that and a major part of healing and growth? Yes, I do. Now, I think it works like this. I think when we go out to seek the forgiveness of others, I don't think that works. It's quite self-fulfilling, self-centered. I want you to forgive me. I had to make amends to a whole load of people in my life as part of my recovery without expectation. I mean, I'm quite thankful that, nobody smacked me in the face or, kicked me out of a room or anything when they probably should have done. But they didn't. They accepted what I had to say. And it didn't really matter, to be honest with you. I mean, later behaviors from some of them didn't sort of reflect that, forgiving you. It wasn't about forgiveness, really. It was about kind of making amends for my part, sweeping off my side of the street, in a sense, for what I'd done and being genuinely sorry for what I'd done and wanting to do better. Can I forgive others for what they did in the past? Yeah, I believe that's a really important part. Now, that's not to undermine some people who've been through some really difficult things at the hands of others, right? Those people who've had abusive experiences,
yes.
Assaulted, physical assault, sexual abuse, etc., etc. Do I believe that you fully need to forgive people? I think you need to get to a place in yourself where you can be at some sort of peace with what happened to you so that you don't linger in resentment. I think this is what it's about, because some people say, well, I can't forgive. I don't push people to you've got to forgive. No, I don't do that. But if we can get to a place where we can work with resentment and work through resentment, you can come to a place of peace, I believe, in yourself in an embodied way, so that it doesn't you're not constantly at the mercy of resentment.
I think that's really interesting. I think that's really, really interesting, because you will never remove what happened and the atrocities behind that and the wrongdoings.
Yeah.
Never. But, a lot of people in quite high profile positions have said forgiveness is one thing, but finding, as you say, the inner peace is different.
Absolutely. It is different. And there's also another thing to add to that, which is that greatly different if you got somebody who treated you badly in the past, let's say, whatever they did, but they are deeply sorry for what they did and they are making some sort of reparation or amend to you. It depends what it is, right? You might say, still, I don't forgive the person. You come to me today and say you're really sorry for what you did to me years ago, but I can't forgive you, yeah. But if you really feel it, that person treated you badly and they didn't know any better at the time, and they maybe put you through hell, or they treated you badly in a relationship, and they come back and they say, look, you don't need to forgive me. I don't say this to you to be forgiven, but I'm genuinely, I feel guilt for what I did. I think to have that experience can be very, very healing. Look, it's the it's the accountability again. It's coming back to accountability. I could have done better. We could have done better. My sense is that if that were a model for how society worked, if people were able to hold their hands up for the wrongs that they've done, for the bloodshed that's occurred over thousands of years and the lives that have been taken, we have examples of this now, right? South Africa and things. Like, if people could do that, the world would be a different place. Let's face it. People would at least own their past, and you might say, "Well, I have remorse for what I did." That's not a bad place to start, right? But you also need to act differently in the future, in the present, and in the future as well.
That is so true.
Yeah,
and it's that's a really interesting and so powerful perspective, because when we're asking for forgiveness, we're asking for ourselves in a way, aren't we?
Oh yeah.
So if we're going in and saying, hey, listen, I'm really, really sorry.
Yeah.
I don't expect forgiveness, but this is, I know I made this mistake. I know I hurt you.
Yeah.
And I'm genuinely sorry.
That's the work.
With nothing coming back, maybe.
Yeah. And you to be okay to go away if you're not forgiven. To say, I did all I could at this stage.
Wow.
But there's also something there, I think, that comes with the that assured sense of that's who you are today. You're not that person that you were,
Yeah.
way
You've done the
back.
work.
You've done the
the
work.
change.
Yeah, I know anyway.
Yeah.
And that person may remember you as you were 5 or 10 years ago, and that it's not their fault that they don't see the change in you, but you can be at peace with that anyway, because in your heart of hearts that you've done the work and you've committed to that.
Thank
You're
you.
not living as that person.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Do you know that you've just hit a bit of a nerve, because I think people often as well, it suits their narrative to remember what you were, not what you've become.
Yeah. Exactly. And I think when we can let go of that idea, and I think that's about forgiveness, right? Forgiving the person who doesn't actually see the steps that I've taken and the changes and who I've become. Well, that's understandable. They've not lived through what you've lived through in the process. And I think that's the. I mean, look, I have a very spiritual take on this.
You do.
I needed God in my life, my higher power, and I needed to find that. And now it is about my relationship with God. This is a spiritual. I'm Christian. Fundamentally I believe in Christ. The power of Christ and the love of Christ. But I believe in the Christ within, the God within. That is for me. It's not me to preach Christianity to anyone. It's not for me to say you need to find a higher power or your own definition of a higher power.
No.
But that's what I needed in my life, and that's what I found. Yeah.
And I mean, Oprah Winfrey famously, she interviews executives, and she's a devout Christian, and she'll ask a question, from what I've read, that when she hires senior executives, she will say, "So, what's your spiritual beliefs?" And they almost like, if they're not, they're like, "Oh no, this is," and they'll say, "Oprah, I'm not religious. That's not what I asked you.
Yeah.
I asked you what your spiritual beliefs are." So when you mention Christianity, and I too am a Christian, I believe in God, and for many, many reasons actually, and I don't push this to people, and spirituality, it's all one, right? It's all one.
Yeah.
There's a greater, whatever you want to believe is your prerogative.
Yeah.
Some people say there's nothing. That's fine. Some people say, well, I often think there's something. Fine, no problem.
Yeah.
Some people say spirituality. They don't like a tag on anything, and that's fine too.
Yeah.
But there is something, a greater being, maybe a universal creation, whatever it might be, that is within all of us. And to your point, if we can not seek forgiveness, but kind of definitely genuinely apologize, and also forgive those who may be judging us.
Absolutely. I think,
and it doesn't mean we're holier than thou.
No, because I think that's about letting go of the ego. That's
100%.
letting go, because my sense is that, God is not my ego. I have an ego. I still have an ego. I say I'm recovering from shedding, David's ego, which is, and I believe, a lot of us have a little bit of that, but to be humble, and to give to others, or if it's making amends for past mistakes or whatever, but with no expectation of return, no expectation of receipt, then our ego becomes deflated, and there's something else in there that then I believe is what takes hold and what is there ultimately. That's just been my lived experience. That's it's really hard to, and I don't seek to demonstrate that in any way, or what's your proof of that? Just it's lived proof of and my own felt sense of that was my experience. Something rescued me from the depths of despair when I most needed it. I asked for help and it came, and life just got better, and all at once lots of challenges got in my way. And professional stuff, legal stuff, divorce, and money troubles, all of that. But I still have that faith. I can go through that. And I say, the most wonderful experience for me of facing some of this stuff and in addiction recovery and doing the work around trauma is that, I met a wonderful lady who became my wife, and we go through everything together. I say we can walk through walls together. We are, and that's more about faith. That's not just about, we're just indestructible. No, we get knocked down at times, and there are obstacles that come up, but we keep going together. And that's just the beauty of a relationship where you can marriage where you can work together in that way.
I love that. Thank you. So let's talk about the Better Man initiative. Yeah. It's something which, you've been fermenting for some time.
Yeah.
And it's it's threads of various elements, isn't it?
Yeah.
Give us some.
Yeah, it needed a bit of a catalyst to get going, if you like. And what really prompted me was, we said before about men taking their lives and men not talking about their problems. And then we see these things in the media, and we who are British and are fans of sport, and particular sport of boxing, will certainly know about Ricky Hatton, boxer who I was a huge fan of. Yeah. Rest in peace, Ricky Hatton, and somebody whose career I followed with an absolute passion. And on the 14th of September this year, Ricky tragically took his life. We now know that to be true, and really, really sad. But it gave me a bit of a jolt in a way that you need to do something here. And there are lots of men's initiatives out there, but I thought, particularly you've got lived experience and professional experience. There's a particular way in which you believe that working with men could be helpful in a group format or a community format. I talk a lot about communities for men, but we've got to create that community and make it accessible. And so, long story short, the Better Man Initiative, it's an idea that I've had for a while, given the jolt by the sad death of Ricky Hatton. But I believe, all of these things quite often are given impetus by an adverse experience, if you like. That's the meaning in it. And it's about doing the inner work from a psychological and transpersonal perspective, if you like. It's probably a spiritual journey, looking into the shadow, which I believe is needed for man. We all have a shadow part of our psyche. It's often what we were referring to before about integrating parts of ourselves, like the anima, and being complete men. Strong, resilient men, if you like, but also men who are compassionate, attuned, relational, men of service, men of society, and doing that work which can only but benefit relationships and society, right? So to help men to not be isolated, to do the work together, that's what's really, really important. To be accountable, to become accountable, to be willing to let go of the ego. Parity as well, in relationships, that I still believe it's the greatest myth that any of us are better than or worse than the next person. We're all human beings at the end of the day. Some of us may have, some people may have achieved more, but that's not about worth. So to support each other. So this is, basically how it works is it's a community where we cover a number of themes to work on ourselves, to work on our relationships, to work on our lives, taking accountability, getting rigorously honest with each other, focusing on our wounds, the mistakes of our past and stuff like that. We have meetings, we do some readings in the meetings, we do a practice, a kind of transpersonal or psychological or spiritual practice, if you like. And we share openly and honestly, and we support each other to do that. It's in its infancy. It's a concept. It's going to be going live here in Dubai, where I do my clinical work at Open Minds Psychiatry, Counseling and Neuroscience Center, but also going to be brought to bear, I think, as an online initiative as well, which I think where it could work particularly well.
And as you say, there's a lot of initiatives out there, but there can never be too many.
Yeah.
because I think, as we said, through a therapist, one strand may not suit you, so then
That's right.
you try another. But what I hope you can sort of agree with me is that, I think that the thing that I found personally, when I had my struggles, was that it was I can't ask for help because I'm this. I mean, I'm strong. I'm this. I'm that. It was my ego.
Yeah.
And in retrospect, I really needed to just share how I felt.
Yeah.
With a safe pair of hands, non-judgmental.
Yeah.
And not necessarily anything coming back, just to hear me.
That's right. Yeah. That's often what we need. We need that holding space, if you like, to be listened to be heard. And many of us, we lacked that. That was the wound for us. We didn't have that maybe from our fathers. That was the paternal wound, and then that's what then we later experience. I mean, I had the wonderful the wonderful blessing and privilege to be helped by men, fellows in my recovery, and to be part of a men's group where I was given that love and support, and sometimes, tough love, but the compassion as well, and the care of having men around me. It's seeing how that works.
Yeah, it's knowing you're not the only one.
Yeah.
Isn't it?
Absolutely. That this is shared experience and that you're not the only one. So that's when you break free of the isolation.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you, David, for today.
So welcome.
I got a couple of final questions for you, if I may. It's very evident that you have had your own challenges. It's very evident that you are a very good psychotherapist. But why do you continue to do what you do? I mean, lots of people pivot, do different things. You're in Dubai. It's a place of opportunity, but you continue on the same. So why do you do what you do?
Yeah, I mean, I've asked myself that question, and part of what I believe is I've been kept in the game in some ways. When I thought I was getting kicked out and thrown off the edge, my higher power always seemed to bring me back in and say, "Nah, you're going to carry on doing this." But what I believe is that why I do what I do is I think to help others to look into the wounds, if you like, that I've talked about, to look into the darkness, and to know that it's possible to do that with support, and you can do that. And that's the alchemical stuff, that is the stuff of alchemy. That's turning stuff to the horrible, icky stuff to gold. That's why I believe I still do what I do. Do I do it in the same form that I used to? Has it changed over the years? Has it evolved? Yes. And do I want to do it in different ways? Yes. Do I believe that I'll just be doing one-to-one therapy for the rest of my days? No. That's the whole idea of doing the initiative, the community, the Better Man initiative, my plans to have to commit to writing books and but the reality is, I do a lot of therapy. I do a lot of one-to-one clinical work. I'd like to do more in the way of groups, writing, online stuff that's getting the message out there a little bit more. I believe as the world is changing, I believe we all need to change. I believe I'm evolving. The way we get messages out there about recovery, healing, mental health and all that, it has to change. It has to move with the times. We have to evolve. Like it or not, it doesn't mean that we're all going to be therapists are all going to be redundant because AI is going to take our jobs, but it means we need to evolve in some way with the times, for sure. Yeah.
All right, thank you. And is there a piece of advice to anyone watching or listening that's maybe falling into a bit of a dark hole, feeling low, feelings of self-loathing, feelings of despair? If you could offer a piece of advice, what would it be?
Well, I think we've touched on it a number of times throughout this podcast and the conversations that we've been having. I think it comes back to the crucial notion of having a sense of purpose. Why do you want life to be different? Why do you want to commit to the process of changing your life, even if it's to change some of your habits or to face something that is going to be difficult to face, to really shift something? What is the wider purpose there? And my sense is this: when we have a true purpose in our lives, it isn't about ourselves. It isn't self-fulfilling.
No,
it isn't just about,
it isn't.
getting £1 million or whatever, or getting the book contract, or the company with in the bright sparkly building with the plush offices. This is about what you are bringing to the world, what you are bringing to others. Yes, it could be your legacy.
Yeah.
But ultimately something, and it doesn't need to be huge, and it doesn't need to start huge.
No.
What is that thing? In the service of what are you prepared to shift some of the things in your life? That's my question, and that gets at purpose. That also gets to our values as well.
Well, it's been an absolute pleasure to have you here.
My pleasure, absolutely.
Very, very thought-provoking points you've put across there, and actionable things to do as well. And I think, that self-reflection, that sort of accountability, that honesty, that integrity, that believing, removing the mask, it's not about me, it's so powerful. So I think as we start to wrap this episode, we will perhaps just remember some of the things that Dr. David Lee has shared with us. David, to you and I, most importantly, but he is a doctor. And it's just that it's that as we've discovered, it's that moment of healing, discovery, understanding that in that journey there is probably going to be some pain, forgiveness, saying sorry, being honest, finding your passion, finding your purpose, and just being reflective in a way that you're okay and you love yourself as well as others. Thank you for watching. Thank you for listening, or however you're discovering So What's Your Story. If it's your first time, we have lots and lots of interesting episodes that you can listen to. If you're a regular, thank you so much. Thank you, everybody. Thank you to my wonderful guests, because without them, this wouldn't be anything. It wouldn't exist. And please help support us by sharing, hitting subscribe, following, whatever you can do. It just helps us to keep creating these episodes, which we hope help you, encourage you to think differently, or effect a change in your life, or that for others. My name's Ian Beaton. You've been listening, watching to So What's Your Story. I love you all. Thank you.